Recording's on. Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you had a nice lunch break. Hope you're enjoying the lobby chat, the memes, the expo. If you just came from our DSO panel, this is going to take that one step further. We're going to dive deeper into building a platform for growth. So this is something, Rich and I have been talking to prospective clients here at Cardinal for 10 years, and we get asked the same question, which is, what is the playbook? What have you seen? How do I tackle building an MSO? What is the right way? Do I go house of brands? Do I go branded house? Is there a transition? And the answer really is to align best with your vision for the company. So we're going to dive into some different ways to tackle that, some solutions depending on which route you want to go. But we've definitely seen it all. So if you have any questions, toss them in the chat. We'll leave room for Q&A at the end. I will breeze through introductions because if you've been here throughout the day, you've had a chance to meet Rich, our Chief Strategy Officer, and hopefully you've had a chance to meet me in our opening session. So we're going to jump on in. Really, this session is about building that digital foundation. And I know with MSOs, whether you're growing through acquisition, keeping, local brands, you're growing through de novo strategy, single brand, or you're in, on the spectrum in between, which so many are. The name of the game as you grow is efficiency. So how are you going to create scalable and predictable marketing strategies? How are you going to know when your next acquisition comes on or your next de novo opens that you have the playbook, what works, what doesn't work, at least to a degree, that you are measuring the same things as you scale, and that you really know what is driving success and where to invest your next dollar. So those are the objectives here. Really, the key thing that I typically ask is, what promises have you made to the brands that you are partnering with, to the doctors, to the partners, to the brands that you've acquired? So if in the acquisition process, one of your value props as an MSO is that you get to retain a certain level of your existing brand, of your own strategy, then we need to build what is scalable across all of those. But it doesn't mean that we're going to just take the same playbook and apply it to everyone. What we would assess to see how scalable or consistent we can get it are these things here. So your creative strategy. Can we build templates and things that can be used across multiple brands, but kind of give you the framework so you're not reinventing the wheel every time? What about your websites? Are we going to move everyone onto a single site, use subdomains? Are we going to build a single template, but give everyone their version of it? There's a lot of different ways we can approach it. What tracking mechanisms can we put in place so that from brand A to B to C to D, we're comparing apples to apples? We are looking at cost to acquire a new patient and not lead submissions on one brand and then comparing that to an acquired patient who generated revenue on another, making it really challenging to know what's working. Analytics, reporting dashboards, consolidating it, but keeping the ability to look at it on a local level. Are you consolidating CRM? Are you going to roll out a single patient management or EHR? Are you going to roll out online booking? Are we going to pilot it? Are we going to universally, put it up on every website? Do you have a centralized call center? Is the front desk going to answer it for each unique brand? There's so many dynamics at play. So this discovery of figuring out where your brand stands in each of these areas then allows us to bring solutions that are really bespoke to your situation. But we're going to walk you through some of those examples. So as many of you know, or maybe you're in the process of thinking about starting up an MSO from the ground up, there's kind of the house of brands and branded house are the two terms commonly used. And we know that in between that can be a spectrum. You can start as a house of brands with a vision, maybe 3 years down the road to be a branded house. You can, be a branded house now and be growing through de novo and then realize that the market really demands that you allow acquisitions to retain their brand. And all of a sudden you're working in reverse. So we realize that it's not always the same. House of brands, localization, you get to keep and retain as much of that local equity as possible. And you really kind of have the ability to stand out in that local market. But from a marketing perspective, if you're managing dozens of websites, you have different patient management systems, you have no economies of scale, and it's harder to analyze. So we realize on your side as marketers, this can be quite a challenging environment to work within. On the branded house side, we know that your marketing is going to be more efficient. Maybe you get to throw all of your content and SEO equity at a single domain. And so you get to see a growth trajectory that's much, much stronger than you would if you have to divide your efforts. But we also know that there can be cons in your acquisition strategy, harder to build trust amongst both the providers and the patients. And that then you have this brand reputation that becomes really fragile and hard to maintain as well. So just walking through some of what we see there, really at the end of the day, the answer to each of these and how we're going to do it can look different, but there's really 5 things that we see need to be considered in building your scalable foundation. So number 1, your website platform, digital front door, whatever you want to call it, where's the patient going to access your brand and become a patient, indicate their intent, fill out a form, make a phone call, schedule online. What is that platform going to look like? How are we going to make it as scalable as possible while complying with whatever terms we have agreed to with the acquisitions that we've made? This and these don't have to be sequential, by the way, but they definitely, as they work together, when you have each piece in place, strong SEO foundation is going to be part of building a scalable website. That is going to be, and Amber pointed out in the chat, even like hosting that, what CMS you're going to use, all of those things can really help you streamline so you're not bouncing between Drupal and WordPress and, you know, a PHP site that someone's uncle made for them 5 years ago, right? How can you possibly deploy SEO when you have all of these scenarios at play? Marketing tech stack, you've hopefully set in now and will continue to tomorrow in on a few sessions about call tracking, HIPAA compliant analytics solutions. How are you going to build a tech stack that ideally, even like down to the contract and negotiation side of things, you're going to have buying power when you are buying, you know, a resource or a technology at scale as a single entity than trying to buy it for each individual platform. So what there can you unify? And then we're going to have your patient acquisition, which is going to be all things paid media and SEO strategy going forward. How are we going to deploy those, learn from each brand? And then ongoing optimization in the search results. So your listings, your organic content, how are you going to adapt when the landscape changes and your vertical all of a sudden allows for LSAs? What is the scalable foundation to allow these things to happen so that you're owning the search results as you add new locations, new providers, you have a repeatable foundation. And I hear a lot of groups say things like first 90-day impact. So we want to be part of that, right? You want marketing to be part of that. It's not just how am I going to bring operational excellence or help with some of the in-clinic adjustments or you know, ease the revenue cycle management burden off of the provider. Like marketing wants to be part of that first 90-day impact as well. So I'm gonna breeze through these because I realize, you know, we don't have a ton of time today. I think the website foundation tends to be one of the biggest hurdles that brands go through because it can have a domino effect on each of the other steps that we just looked at. So typically what I will say is, as best as possible, if you are dealing with a house of brands, can you come up with a templated, modular based design that you can kind of stamp out for each brand? And the personalization, the level at which you allow that to happen, whether it's, you know, we're going to have a single set of brand colors and fonts and imagery, but we're going to put your logo and your doctors and your location and your content on it. You can also build a template where you can completely change it. So it may be from a back-end perspective the same, but if you looked at brand A and brand B, when you really apply their colors, their fonts, their imagery, it's very hard to tell that it's actually built on the same template. So again, there's modifications and a spectrum here on how you can treat this. But what you as a marketer are going to want is a single backend that you are comfortable with. You know how to do the same thing 20 times if you have to manage 20 brands. It can get pretty technical here, and we can always do a discovery if you guys want to talk through this, but you've got, different URL and domain structures here as well. You can have site A, site B, site C.com. You can have, your main site / location and do like a bit of a consolidated effort while still trying to maintain multiple brands. You can go the subdomain route, and there's different pros and cons to each of those. I think when we sit down and understand your short and long-term vision for how your MSO is going to look over time, we can get you a website structure that best meets those needs. I think there's another interesting thing in website. The average website's lifespan, with how quickly today is the landscape today is changing, is about 2.7 years. So you don't have to necessarily say, is this the structure for the 10-year plan? But is this the structure for the 3-year plan? You probably want to make sure that you're meeting that. Branding, how similar or dissimilar are the branding elements going to be? You see a lot of MSOs doing, keeping, Lauren's Dental and Rich's Dental, like truly the different entity and domain names, but you may see that you're going to bring the logo from the MSO down so that everyone's visual identity is the same. That makes things a lot easier when you're trying to build creative and websites. Who's going to maintain them? So, this may help you answer the question of subdomain, single domain, multiple domains. Do you have the manpower to do it effectively? And that may impact your decision. And then performance. How do you want to be able to look at performance, to report? And does that have any weight on the decisions that you're going to make? At the end of the day, there's technologies. We've been talking a lot about technology today that can make your life easier. So things like having a keyword strategy, using AI-driven or technology-driven deployment of SEO. I know that Amber just mentioned in the chat schema. There's tools that can help you kind of stamp out schema at scale. At the local side of things, reputation management and listing management tools. Don't try to be a hero. Don't say I'm going to manage 100 Google My Business profiles manually and constantly be checking to see if something got flagged or a review was left. There's tools to help you do that. And at a certain point, it's easier to put the technologies in place when you're smaller and plan for the future than it is to kind of come back retroactively and try to put those in place when you've got 200 clinics. So what if any technologies can you start with now that are going to help you down the road? And then, working on, and this again plays into the tool usage, how are we going to kind of stamp out our place in the results? So consistency across how you talk about yourselves in the brand name, starting programs to drive reviews at scale. Again, technology, Bird Eyes, Podiums, Reputation.coms of the world are all tools to help you do this at scale. Relevance, making sure that things like your categories, how you position yourself are solid and consistent. And then do you have the ability to create engagement? The resources, I know a lot of it is capacity, but a strategy too, to make it as scalable as possible. How do I handle a review when it comes in? Do we have a single playbook for how to do this? And then, what we then want to start looking at is measuring the efficacy of all of these things. So Rich, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about how to build that tech stack in this most scalable way possible.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I mean, I think whether you're a house of brands or a branded house, when you're creating a new MSO, it's always about trying to get to a path of least resistance, but also starting off on the right foot. And measurement is one of the key foundational building blocks of driving growth at any organization. If you're optimizing and measuring the right signals that are showing you whether you're being successful or not in your efforts, that is going to be key. And more often than not, and for those of you who've come across me before in either an audit or as an existing client, you'll hear me talk about this all the time. Are we measuring the right things? And are we set up for success in terms of our MarTech stack? So if we look at what a great MarTech stack looks like, the first box that we really want to check, especially given the light of the regulatory changes in the last 12 months, is are we HIPAA compliant? Google Analytics 4, that's out. Metapixel, that's out. other DSP pixels are out, Google Ads pixels out. So how do we track in a HIPAA compliant way? Well, there's ways to do that. A number of amazing vendors who are here at the Scaling Up conference at the moment: Line, Patient Prism, um, some CDPs, customer data platforms in the space of like FreshPaint. But there's also other options in terms of online booking. So we work with Next Patient, Next Health. We work with a number of others to track leads in a HIPAA compliant way, whether they have a BAA with you guys directly or whether they are just HIPAA compliant in terms of their practices. They allow us to not only get the right data, but do so in a way where we're not going to come, into any issues or run into any issues with HHS or, class action lawsuits or anything, down the road that would not be fun to walk into. So we want to make sure that we have the right signals. We want to make sure that it's HIPAA compliant. And then we want to make sure that we're leveraging that data in the right way. So capturing whether a new patient appointment is happening is step one. But then step two is using that data to inform our campaigns and our SEO strategy or any of our other marketing efforts that we're doing. And that might be done in an automated way by sending those conversions back into an advertising platform, or it might be done in an anecdotal way by doing analyses through Mixpanel as an example, or Heap if you have those analytics tools set up, to understand if that new blog post that you just put up is actually driving new patient activity, or is it just driving traffic to the website. So the MarTech landscape has become a bit more complicated with HIPAA, but there are some affordable options out there to get going for MSOs that will allow you to have the same functionality that you had in the old world when you were leveraging Google Analytics and Google Ads and Meta.
And Rich, one thing I'll add, if you sat in on our session this morning, you heard us talking to Blair, and they, in a situation where you are very much an MSO oriented around retention of existing brands and as much of their current framework, including maybe their EHR. So you've got all these disparate systems and it's really hard to consolidate. I think some of these tools can be kind of that like holy grail in terms of unifying common data points and getting all brands to a place where I understand and I'm measuring the same things, because they are super flexible in the different technologies that they can integrate with. So you may be able to apply a Line or a Next Health across, 7 different brands with 7 different patient management systems and get to the same measurement point with all of them, despite the fact that, they're all set up differently. So.
Yeah, exactly. They get you close enough they get you to the right signals without having to integrate necessarily with every single one of your disparate systems, which is key. Once the other key thing when we think about measurement is having a centralized location for reporting. So again, and not just a centralized location for reporting, but also a customizable and flexible reporting solution. So again, if you're thinking that maybe I'm running 25 campaigns for 14 different brands, you're not going to want to have to log into 14 different dashboards or go this place for this piece of data, log into this technology for this piece of data. You're going to want to aggregate all of that data together into one centralized location. And then you're going to want to be able to filter or flick through brands and sort of look at different data through different lenses to understand what's going on across your house of brands, or across all the locations within your branded house, or however you segment that branded house. So one of the things that we've really worked on is building like a reporting solution that is both HIPAA compliant, but that is agile and flexible enough to be completely custom to the needs of our MSOs that we work with, whereby any potential custom way that they want to see the data, whether it's we have some clients where they'll have multiple PE firms that back them at different locations, and they want to be able to see which of their locations roll up under which PE firm that backs them, and look at how each PE firm's portfolio of locations are performing. So again, that's obviously a very custom solution. Like there's no place in Google Ads where you can type the name of the PE firm that campaign rolls up into. But it allows them the flexibility to report out to all of their stakeholders and everybody else who is vested in understanding what that performance looks like, and whether or not digital is working in terms of growing the MSO. So again, this is another key piece to invest in, especially if you're going to have some complexity in your efforts and your marketing strategies.
Rich, I think this helps the marketers too. We get asked a lot, you have this juxtaposition sometimes of doing the greatest good for the greatest percentage of, the population. And then you have all these super nuanced individual businesses at the end of the day that have local, different circumstances at play, different local pressures. And you're kind of constantly pulled between those two things. And a place where you can see the health of the portfolio and that your general direction is making an impact and that you're doing the right things, but then drill down maybe in areas where, why is this location not meeting my global benchmark for performance? That becomes a focus area and helps me kind of figure out where I need to maybe spend more time, more dollars, more, more focus, get more aligned with operations, whatever it may be. So it can be kind of like a discovery and problem solving tool on the marketing side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we alluded to it a couple of slides ago. The major difference in the performance that you're able to drive from digital marketing comes around the signals that you're tracking. So this is a screenshot from one of the partners that we leverage on the lead tracking side called Line, who I believe are presenting tomorrow morning at Scaling Up. So please do attend their session if you're interested in that technology. But from on the left-hand side here, you can see a screenshot of, this is actually the number of new patient leads that are being tracked, either via a phone call that came in, an inbound phone call, or a form submission that generated an outbound phone call to schedule that appointment, or even an online booking solution that has been integrated with Line. So the whole sort of lead spectrum of different mechanisms that someone could become a patient is captured inside of the Line's platform. And it shows us the number of new patient leads. So that's somebody who is a legitimate lead who is interested in becoming a patient that's come in, and then the number of booked appointments that resulted in, and the conversion rate. So you can see all that there. And then these booked appointments and new patient leads can be passed back into your analytics solution. They can pass back into your ad platform solution. So you can optimize directly to new patient leads and new patient booked appointments. The other thing that these solutions do give you oftentimes is the reasons why a lead did not become an appointment. And so that's what you can see here on the right-hand side is a list of reasons why somebody who was interested in your service and wanted to become a new patient didn't end up actually taking that next step. And this gives you some great anecdotal information to say, oh, wow, we're capturing a lot of people who are out of network insurance. Maybe we need to make our insurance section on our landing page more prominent and be really clear about the insurance that we accept. Or maybe we need to be really clear about, if you're out of network, what those costs could look like, because if it's going to be a real turnoff for a lot of people, we want to get ahead of that, right? Or maybe we actually aren't doing enough to talk about, other ways that we can, the financial options that we have available to make this more affordable to people who are out of network. And maybe we're not doing a good enough job on the phone of educating people in that regard as well. So there's a lot of great anecdotal information that we can get. A great example of that is Medicaid. Oftentimes we'll see a lot of people who have Medicaid. And so, we can make changes to our advertising copy. We can make changes to the landing page to make sure that we are really clear that we don't accept Medicaid before we're driving those leads and clogging up the phone lines with people who aren't actually your ideal patient. So again, capturing the right information not only helps from a measurement point of view and understanding success, but also from an optimization point of view to drive better performance. So in terms of, which levers should you pull in order to try and grow the MSO, that's really going to, you're really going to be thinking about that when you're thinking about the approach that you take to growing your MSO, right? Whether it's the house of brands or the branded house, and how far along each of those individual brands or that holistic brand is in their marketing maturity. So if we look at, the next slide here, and we look at the tactics that are available, if you just need to turn on the patient spigot, paid search is a fantastic solution for that, right? So if you're starting a brand new MSO, you have no equity, you have no organic visibility, you've got no brand awareness, and you service a patient population that already knows what you offer and is out and is seeking it, then PPC is the perfect solution. Because, you know, if you're a dentist, you can be on the keyword dentist near me. And even though people haven't heard of you, you will drive new leads, right? And especially if you're measuring the right thing through the solutions that we previously talked about, you will drive patient volume. But obviously that is a relatively costly way to drive growth. And you want to balance that out with an organic approach, a sustainable organic approach. That is going to be where your most efficient lead is going to come from, especially if there is demand to be captured. And so you want to build that over time. Now, if you're doing a house of brands, and you've acquired established brands, maybe you already have a lot of SEO equity there and you can just capitalize on that. And then you can use PPC in a more surgical way to help with certain locations that aren't ranking as well, where you just need to push the patient volume, fill capacity gaps. That's fantastic, right? But if you are a brand new single brand MSO, chances are you don't have any of that, right? So you've got to build up all of that organic. Social media and display, native, programmatic video, these are all fantastic if you don't have any, you know, solid brand awareness and you need to provide some assist to downstream tactics like SEO and PPC, and understanding how these all play together, right? Like if you run a lot of middle of the funnel social advertising and display advertising and native advertising to drive awareness around your brand and really build a rapport with users, especially through video, you know, talk about your promotions, talk about your USPs, chances are that's going to have a really positive impact on your organic and even on your paid search campaigns at the bottom of the funnel. So, you know, but I think everything rolls back to what is the goal, what is your timing, and what is your budget ultimately, in terms of figuring out what your ultimate marketing mix needs to be to hit those goals, both in the short term, but also in the longer term.
I think what's interesting, Rich, that I'll call out here is, you know, these, although the impact, you know, what we're looking at here on the back end is when the impact hits, it's really important that you have consideration, at least for all of these things. You know, they all start on the same axis. It's just that the impact of paid is a little bit more immediate. What happens, or what I tend to see happen a lot, is because the impact of paid is so, or much more immediate, maybe it's the only thing we invest in and we leave everything else. We say like, we'll get to it. This line, this curve, you know, it looks a lot longer and your investment in paid search goes up. You know, if you don't start the other things that can have real long-term equity, that can be sustainable long-term and mean that you don't have to pay to play as aggressively at the top of the results just to get some basic traffic in the door. So I always like to call out, don't mistake this for when you should start these things. This is, you know, an indication of over time when you start to yield the impact of doing these activities.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say on that is don't look at them as individual components, right? They are all part of a holistic approach, and oftentimes they feed on each other and assist each other. So it should definitely not be like, let's wean ourselves off paid and only do SEO, because paid probably has a positive impact on SEO. Same with, let's only do paid, to your point, and not invest in SEO, because at some point down the road, you're going to really regret that decision when you could have been driving.
When your biggest competitors just starts dominating the results and you have nowhere else to go. I think the key is to the scalable side of it is having levers to pull. One lever to pull that gets broken leaves you nowhere. What we want to build is kind of the multiple levers. So when, you know, and this model, this could be your MSO as a whole. This could be a single location, a de novo within your portfolio, and they may work through an evolution, and the mix for each location, brand within your portfolio or house of brands may be also at varying degrees of this marketing evolution. There's not a one size fits all for a 50 brand group. The brands are going to come in at various maturity levels, and we're going to, you know, kind of pinpoint them, meet them where they are, and pick them up and carry them forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're basically at time, so I'm going to be very quick. I know
we have a few minutes. I did get a call out that the entire summit has a 15-minute break right now. So if you need it, please feel free to take it. Rich and I will run a few minutes over before we introduce our next session.
Yeah, so just briefly on these last few slides, I think I already mentioned this. Obviously, if there is existing demand out there that just needs to be captured, search is going to be your most efficient way to do that, whether it be SEO or paid search. Those people are at the bottom of the funnel. They are much closer to conversion. They are the easiest to convert into new patients, especially if you're sending the right signals to the advertising platforms or into your analytics solution to measure that success in what you're doing. You may end up in situations though where there isn't just relevant demand at the bottom of the funnel, or you have a specific audience that you're trying to seek whose search behavior behaves like other patient populations that you are not trying to seek. So like the Medicaid example that we gave earlier, for instance, right? Like people who have Medicaid search the same way as people who have the best corporate insurance in America. So, if you have a payer specific audience need, then you might be looking at, demand side platforms, display advertising, native advertising, paid social advertising to target those folks who have that specific payer as an example, so that you can get them to the site and then try and engage them because they're more your niche audience and they're more actually relevant and potentially more primed for conversion than somebody who is just at the bottom of the funnel seeking out your service. So again, determining your media mix or your channel mix is really incumbent on what your patient profile has to look like, what your patient persona is, and who you service inside of the patient population. And then, I think for patient acquisition, I think we're kind of saying the same thing, but there's like a nested layer of, if you have a finite budget, focus on the most efficient channels first, right? So potentially that's people who are seeking the brand. Although again, with branded search, you should probably do on-off tests to see how running branded paid search impacts your organic and vice versa. But then maybe it's re-engaging people through remarketing efforts that are also at the bottom of the funnel, then moving further up to non-branded search to capture those people who are already raising their hands. And then beyond that, you're in that contextual layer of people who are in market for your services, but might not be actively seeking them out at that moment, but they're browsing online and you can engage with them. And then you start to go up to maybe third-party audiences that you're targeting. So you can target people who've, something that we're doing right now is targeting people who've had a referral to go to a PT, but they haven't started PT treatment yet. So we can get that granular in terms of our targeting. But really what you want to do is, especially if you have a finite budget and you're just starting out, really focus in on what's going to be the highest return tactics first before going up the funnel. I think we're drawn to sexy things like connect TV, but if you're building an MSO, that's not where you want to start, right? Unless you're doing something that's a complete paradigm shift and a disruptor and nobody's heard of it before and they need to be educated. But for most of us who are selling the same service that most of our patient populations are already aware of, start at the bottom and work your way up.
And just a quick plug, if media channel mix and account structures is really interesting to you, our next session with our paid media supervisor, Ryan Dobrin, is going to be 45 minutes specific on how to structure paid media campaigns. So hop on over to that via the lobby in about 10, 15 minutes if you want to dive deeper on that. And I know you spoke a little bit about that, Rich.
I spoke a little bit about that already.
Yeah.
So yeah, just demand generation is a great solution if you need to make someone aware of something that they wouldn't already be aware of. You have a strong offer that you want to promote. You've maximized search, right? So you're doing everything that you can in SEO and PPC, or you're starting to get to a point of significant diminishing return in paid search and demand capture efforts. That's when it really makes sense to leverage demand generation. Otherwise, like I said, focus on what's most efficient and it's going to grow the brand the quickest, which is generally tends to be demand capture. I will say the caveat there is test. So, if you are wondering, well, would a social campaign outperform some inefficient campaigns that we have for certain side of our MSO? the only way that you're ever going to know is if you test and launch them and see what happens. So definitely encourage you to not think just about demand capture. There should be opportunities to test in demand generation where it makes sense to do so. And then, way up the funnel, right? If you're on top of the funnel, things like connected TV, they are fantastic for building brand credibility. They're unskippable assets, so they help you build rapport with audiences. I think that the stat here is 30-second ad slots can on average increase the user's time spent with a brand by over 250%. So if your goal is brand recall or brand consideration, then you absolutely want to start thinking about programmatic video and connected TV and top of the funnel social video as part of your strategy. But for most MSOs, when they're starting out, it's more about patient growth. And then as they get larger, when the conversation then pivots to stealing market share, that's when a lot of the brand equity and brand metrics really start to come into play, right? Would I choose you over one of your major competitors? And that's where this becomes important. But I would not recommend starting here unless you had some very specific goals around driving brand awareness and brand consideration.
And Rich, I know we're coming to an end. We got a quick question on remarketing in a HIPAA compliant manner. Any final words on that topic?
Yeah, the easiest way to do it is to do this sort of platform-based retargeting effort, right? So to build a funnel structure whereby you can expose somebody at the top of the funnel with video and then retarget them on the same platform or on an adjacent platform if you can send that audience information over to it in the middle of the funnel. So you're building this pretty robust brand experience through the funnel strategy before they even get to the website. Remarketing on the website is more tricky. I'm not saying it can't be done, it can be done, but you will need a CDP like Freshpaint in order to do that, or a way to pass audiences into an advertising platform in a HIPAA compliant way.
Rich, you didn't even use the term I coined and credited to you this morning, which really sequential messaging is what you're doing. You're remarketing, if you want to compare it to traditional remarketing, but it's more so user engaged with A, therefore I'm going to serve them B. It's almost like an email nurture flow, right? But we're just doing it within an advertising platform where we don't have PII to, email or text them. So we're going to do it based on their engagements on social or with video or whatever channel we're using. I know we've gone over. Thank you all for sticking around. I'm going to ask you to go back to the lobby, take a few minutes, have a break, join us for our paid media multi-location structure conversation with Ryan Dobrin. If you are spending money on paid search and you want to know how am I supposed to structure this thing, we're going to get really granular and tactical on that conversation. So thank you guys. Thanks, Rich. I'll talk to you later today.
Thanks, Lauren. See you later.